So I'd like to revisit the idea of encapsulation and sort of put the idea of getters and setters into a more elaborate context, which can sort of which can sort of bring some clarity to why one would want to actually use getters and setters, and why they're not just some random concept which we don't know where to sort of apply. So I'm going to start by sort of completing this activity here, and this is sort of a task which is sort of subdivided into many parts. And so essentially we're asking for some of the specifications of a car, your favorite model, your make, when the year or rather how when the year of the car was made, right? And then we're going to create an object of the car class, which we have over here. And essentially what we're going to do then is we're going to equate what the user enters with the instance variable of the car. And so first and foremost, we want to go into the car class, the template, and actually make these instance variables present. So we would have, let's just start by saying it's public. We'll have a string called, so we want the make, right? And we also want the model. And we also want an integer which sort of stores the year of the car, right? And then we'd obviously have a constructor as well. And our constructor would actually just, our constructor would essentially just be those variables, right? And so make can just be two quotation marks, and our model can essentially just be again two quotation marks, and our year, which is an integer, can essentially, we can just make that 2020 because that's our year right now. And essentially we want to make this comparison with 2020, which is why we're giving it a definite value. So essentially, I mean, at this point, let's go ahead and actually work with our activities here. So we ask the user for their favorite car. We say, okay, what's your favorite car? What is the make of your favorite car? Okay. And essentially, after doing that, we save that answer into a string, and so we can say string new make, and I say new make because I don't want you to confuse this make for the make that we have on the class. And so new make is going to be the make that the user enters, okay? And so we have string new make equals data dot next. Next just takes in the next word that the user enters, and then essentially we do the same thing with with the model here, right? What is the model of your favorite car? Okay, and we store that into a string variable as well. Sounds good. Sounds good. And so at this point, we want to do this once more for the integer variable, which actually keeps track of the year. Okay. Excellent. So at this point, so we have these specifications entered by the user, right? And that's not too much. But what we're going to do now is we're going to create an object, right? We're going to create an object, and we're going to title that my favorite car. So what we do is we sort of write down the name of the class, and we're going to name the object or the reference my favorite car, and then we're going to say new car, which really just creates that object there. And so at this point, what we want to do now is we want to essentially set what these variables are equal to what the user has entered. So there's really, I mean, if you think about it, what we could do is we could just say, if we go about this on a basic level, what we could do is we could just say, well, car, or let's say my favorite car, right? My favorite car dot name can just equal to the name that the user entered up here, which was new, actually not name, but we're talking about make, right? So can just equal to the make that the user entered, right? So make is equal to new make. And so essentially we do this with each and every instance variable of the class. And this is, again, a very simple way of going about it, probably not the correct way, but we say my favorite car dot make is equal to new make. And we say my favorite car dot model, in this case it would be model, is equal to new model, right? And we can say the same thing for an integer, which would be the year, is equal to the year that the user entered. Okay. And then we obviously just want to sort of print this out. And so we can just print this out. We could say model, and we start off with make. So let's just start off with make. We say our make is essentially our. So we have my favorite car, right? We want to print out the make of this object. So it's going to be my favorite car dot make, and then again we just do this for essentially each and every line here. So we have make, now we do model, and so we can just change this to model. And then we have year. And I think this works. And essentially, I mean, this is cool. So essentially, we just enter a couple attributes in, and those attributes are then assigned to the car object. And now the car object, which has these variables, is now given a definition, and that's stored into my favorite car. And it just prints out those specific variables, which are now attached to the my favorite car object. Now, essentially, I mean, at this point, it would be pretty cool to sort of, so first let's just see if this actually works, and then we'll add on to this. So we say, what is your favorite car? So we say Ford, and then we say Mustang, and then we also say, what is the year of your favorite car, right? And so what is the year? We can say 1995. Okay, so we have Ford, Mustang, and 1995. So that works. Now it would be cool if we could just essentially, if we could somehow sort of present the age of the car, right? And so what we can do is we can go into our car class, and we can add that to our car definition, and we can say, okay, we'll have a public method which will sort of return the age of the car, right? And so we'll have something called our current year, which is equal to 2020, and then we'll have the age of the car, which will essentially just be the current year, which is 2020, minus the year that they enter. So if they were to enter 2015, then we would do 2020 minus 2015. That would give us an age of 5. And then after that is done, we'll just return the age. Okay. And then we can just have an integer variable called age. I mean, there's two ways to go about it. We can just print that out. We can just say my favorite car dot age, or rather just dot compute age. Okay, we can do that, which would give us an answer. Or we could actually store this into a variable called age. And that actually would be better, because then we could actually play around with that if we wanted to. And then we could just print this out, and it would be called age. And then we would be able to get the age of the car. And so this just allows us to sort of add functionality here. So it says, what is the make of your favorite car? And so we say, well, it could be a Honda, right? Accord. And what is the year of your favorite car? So we could say 2015, and then it pops back 5. And we could just say, well, your age, right? This is your age. And then concatenate it, okay? And that would give us our answer. So let's just try this again. So it's a 2000, it'd probably be 20 years old, right? And so we have 20 years old. Now, the issue with this is that we've sort of given access to the user to really do whatever they want with the age variable. For instance, they could enter Ford and Mustang, and then what they could do is they could just enter 20. They could do 1220. Now, 1220, that year had no cars, right? There were no cars around in the year 1220, in the year 1220, right? And so and this still gives us an answer. And so not only does it give us an answer for cars for a time frame which cars didn't exist, but it also gives us an answer for when cars for a year which when a particular car is not made, right? And so it gives us a negative number. And so I mean, this just sort of it's just not accurate, right? It's not a good way sort of approach programming, right? We're giving access to the user to really do whatever he wants with the age variable, and so that's a problem. And so what we can do is we can just limit off access. We can say, okay, you're no longer going to be able to access year as you can't set year to whatever you want. It's going to be private. Okay. So now what happens is it gives me this underline here because it's private, so it's out of scope. And that just means that they could set a year here, but it's not going to equate to the year of the object because I've made it private. The access modifier is now private. And if I did this with each and every variable, I mean, the same thing would happen. So what I could do instead of essentially letting the user set the variable here out in the open, essentially what I could do is I could make a set method, and I'll show you how. So we can make public set. It's not going to return anything. It's just going to be a set method. It's going to set a it's going to set the year. Okay, and it's going to take an integer called new year, and that's just going to be the integer that the user enters. This is sort of a placeholder for that. And when they enter new year into these parameters, it's essentially what it's going to do is going to say, okay, well, the year that you enter, essentially the year that is sort of pertains to the car object is going to equate to the year that we've entered here. And so, I mean, this is all fine, and that's exactly what's happening. But we only want to do this in a certain circumstance, and that circumstance is if essentially if the new year is greater than or equal to 18, let's say 90, because that's when cars were really made, and new year is sort of less than or equal to 2020, then and only then can you essentially set year equal to new year, or can you set the year of the car or the car object equal to the year that the user has entered. So only in this particular case will the user be able to set year equal to new year, or the year of the object with the year that the user entered. And so this sort of limits off the ability to sort of just do whatever you want with the particular year. And so here, instead of saying my favorite car dot year equals new year, what we could do instead is we could just erase that, or let's just comment that out. And what we could do instead is we could just say my favorite car dot set year. And this is essentially going to take in what the user entered. So that's just going to be new year, right? So at this point, we have something called a setter, right? And so it sets that variable. But you can notice that we still have a problem. It's not able to retrieve that variable because the variable is made private. And so what we can do now is, so we have a setter, it sets the year, but what we can do now is we can also make something called a getter, which will essentially get the year. And so we can say public void get year int, and this won't actually take anything. It's just returning year after those modifications are made. And so we can say get year, but we can also say just return. We can just return year, and we're really referring to the year on the class level, the year that's sort of tied down to the object or is a part of the object. And so instead of saying my favorite car dot year, which is no longer accessible to us because we've made this variable private, instead what we can do is we can just say my favorite car dot get year. Okay. And that get year is essentially going to return whatever was the result of this, which is essentially just the class object. And so after this whole vetting process is done, if we wanted, we could just return what the result of that vetting process was. And so that's really how we go about sort of making it such that we can control really what the user can enter. And so it's problematic if we don't do that, because then they can enter these absurd values and actually get a response for it. So what we'd want to do is we'd really want to do this with each and every single variable. We'd want to make the make and the model private as well, and we'd want to make a setter for the model and make, as well as a getter for the model and make. And then instead of sort of accessing these variables in this way, we would sort of use set year and then get year, or set model and get model. And I mean, here, for instance, here, my favorite car dot make equals new make, we wouldn't have this, right? We would have, we would have my favorite, we'd have my favorite car dot set make. Okay. And essentially what that would do is we would actually have to create a method for that, right? So we would have to do public, it's not going to return anything. It's just setting the value, right? So it would be set make. It would have to take in a variable, a string variable. And then what it would do is it would essentially just, we could just say that the make that we're referring to on the class level here is equal to the new make, which is of course what the user enters. And after that is done, I mean, so we can set the make, right? Because the make is nothing but what the user enters, and so they enter new make here, and that is sent to the new make method, and then the new make method, or the set make method, actually just takes in what the user entered and equates it to what we have as an instance variable on the class level. And so the setting process is, again, accomplished, but we can't really get make, right? We can't get make. We can get it now because make is public, but in normal cases, we wouldn't be able to get it if it was private. And that's what we want to do. We want to make it private, such that we can actually do whatever we want with the make variable. And so now you can probably observe that this is underlined as red. We can't get make. And so what we want to do instead is we want to say, okay, we'll just get make. And we actually have to have a method for that, right? So what we've done is we've set make, but now what we'd want to do is we'd want to return a string, and that's just going to be get make, right? And then we're going to just return the variable that we have on the class level. And then that just no longer poses a problem for us, right? I mean, the model is still operating under that old old-fashioned basic accessing of the variable. But once you actually begin to realize that users can just take advantage of the fact that you haven't specified certain conditions, you actually want to make sure that those conditions are imposed. And so you do that by creating methods within which you can actually have if statements or comparisons, in order to ensure that what the user enters is sort of reflects what you want them to enter, or within a certain range, or within a, just so that it satisfies a particular context which you want it to. And so that sort of summarizes the other example here of sort of using encapsulation, or getters and setters rather.